Hello. Hello.
Put my water down here. So I'm coming out of my skin. I'm so excited. I'm sitting on the floor next to the garage, the door that opens up to the garage stairs, and I'm waiting avidly for my favorite person to come home from his shift at the Pizza Hut to play with me. He is 17, and he is my cousin, and he inhabits the room at the end of our ranch house. Like many family members before him, it's the place that they used as their launching pad into America when they first arrived. At the age of 3, I know nothing of my cousin's life before that magical moment that I met him. I know nothing about the war that he escaped that would rage for 8 years more, that would take 1 million casualties, and that would take any male between the age of 13 and 40 strongly into its fists. At the age of 3, I didn't know anything about the journey that it took for him at the age of 16 to leave that place of Iran and get to Nashville. I wouldn't know about the smugglers that abandoned him, the near arrest at the Turkish border, or the watch that his father gave him that someone stole that was meant to sustain him. I wouldn't know any of this. All I know is that he makes funny faces and funny noises, and when he does that, I laugh, and then he laughs, and his head bops, and his shoulders shake, and I'm the happiest person on earth. In a few years, his siblings and parents would finally come, and we would spend that night unsewing the jewels and the valuable things out of the seams of their bathrobes and clothes. We would uncover their little tokens of their homes back in Iran that they managed to hide in the suitcase. And we would pull out the herbs that were in books so that they can bring them over to this new land, because they weren't allowed to really flee, so they couldn't demonstrate or take any of these things outright. And I can still smell the fenugreek and the cumin and the tarragon of those suitcases even now. But that night, when I was waiting for him, I was just a 3-year-old waiting for my favorite person in the world to come home from making pizzas to play with me. Iran, a friendly country, had become an enemy overnight. And my mom, in her new English, wrote dozens and dozens of letters to congressmen and senators, employed the only immigrant lawyer in Nashville at the time, and worked really hard with lots of coins at the payphone to get her family members over here. And by 1988, she was successful, and I had 7 cousins and 6 aunts and uncles and a pair of grandparents here. One family wasn't allowed to come and settled in Canada, and the other one remained in Iran. But my memories of this are not of her stress or how intense this all was, but of the joy, the laughter, the food, and community. I would know of huge pots of saffron, lentil, and dill rice, and stews, many of them that would adorn a dining room table like a Christmas tree, where it was enough food to feed the growing community of Iranians all dressed up to party on a Saturday night together. I would know of dancing that would go late into the night, and falling asleep mid-party in the lap of my aunt as I could hear her laughter reverberating through her chest as I slept. I would know everyone sitting on the couches at night and on the floors at the end of the night, the sound of a man singing a cappella, a song that sounded more like a cry, and it would be a sound of home that I would not know, but could feel. I would know the tears of adults, quiet tears, when my mother would be reading the letter from her mother. The loud tears of a reunion at Atlanta airport when a family could finally make it. And the tears of opening a suitcase like there was something that didn't make it. I wouldn't know until later that what was left behind was their lives, their identities, their sense of self. I wouldn't know because they were so good at creating a new life so quickly. Good time for this. When life at home was warm and full of a culture from a different place, life in Nashville was also very warm and joyful. 80s Nashvillians embraced us. We were invited to church gatherings. I remember our pharmacist knew all of our names, and neighbors would take care of me and my sister like their own. But then there were instances where that didn't feel like that, where students and fellow students kept on asking where I was from, though I was born in the same hospital they were, would ask me why my food smelled strange, and I didn't know what they meant. I remember my 4th grade teacher asked my parents to stop speaking Persian because it was ruining my learning of the English language. So, you know, the stories went on, but like all children, I was sensitive, and the constant low-level messaging that I didn't belong did permeate. It created fear and shame in me to be me. I was always on watch that someone would point out all the ways I was different, and I would be revealed for the unworthy foreigner's kid that they assumed I was. I tell you this story for many reasons, but mostly to say, what we live informs how we see the world and who we trust. Because I was taught that human bonds are the strongest bonds, that relationships are the source of joy, and that making those bonds happens in a split second with kindness and generosity. This has been the basis of my advocacy, and it has been built in this learning. I also learned lessons that have taught me to be critical, cautious, and curious about what is happening around me. One, that systems and institutions are not necessarily reliable and can be scary and may not protect you, but family will. 2, that a place can be home until extremists take over. 3, that you can be born somewhere and people will still question if you're from there. And 4, the antidote to fear and anxiety is community, food, music, and dance.
Amen.
There is a narrative that supports racist and unjust structures that have been around for a long time here, that say that there's one kind of Tennessean, one main experience that is allowed to be named Tennessean, and then there's all of us. Especially in our legislature, the notion that there's one way to be in the world, and that way is predominantly white and from outside the major cities, and that is the true Tennessean. But it's not true. My family, especially my dad, knows every corner of this state, and with pride. My family loves a good weekend in Gatlinburg, and a picnic and a dip in Percy Priest Lake, and a weekend getaway to Jackson like everyone. And my son was born in 2018 in probably the exact same room that I was 40 years prior in 1978. I am a Tennessean.
Amen.
I'm also an Iranian. I am also an American, in the best way, because I matured and became an adult in so many corners of this amazing country. And I decided as a Tennessean that when 6 people were killed on March 27, 2023, at the Covenant School, it was time to demand change together. Many of us who have been advocating on a slew of other issues turned our focus to make our voices heard on this one. We joined thousands of Tennesseans to demand gun safety in our state. In fact, Governor Bill Lee requested that people submit comments on what they wanted the special session on gun safety to be about. According to the analysis done by Rise and Shine Tennessee volunteers, 84% of those people said they wanted gun safety laws, many of whom were gun owners. 20,000 comments, okay? I cried through those comments, grandfathers and fathers, everybody sharing what they wanted. But don't take it from me. Let me read you some of those. 1, at this rate, I feel sure I won't see at least one of my kids grow up or be able to grow old with my husband due to the risk of becoming victims of another mass shooting. 2, as a minister and a person of faith, the most pro-life thing we can do in this situation is limit access to weapons that can be used to kill the masses with efficiency. And finally, my 10-year-old should not come home on the first day of school worrying that his seat is closest to the door, saying he would get shot first if a bad guy came in, but he did. I know of the desperation in an autocracy. Just this year, I watched from afar as Iranian youth sacrifice their lives over and over again for the ability to hold hands, have public expression, show their hair. I saw countless women and girls take off their veils, and that in a country that sees that as a violent assault on their government. But to know the desperation in a democracy is a special kind of pain. A place that asks you what you think but doesn't care when you respond. A place that uses the institutions of democracy to limit voter participation and to ensure certain outcomes. A place that has 20,000 people take time to beg for gun safety. And a place in return that holds a special session that focuses on criminalizing youth.
Yes, exactly.
Tennessee has done many horrible things, but it has also birthed courage and many leaders of change. When in 1920, a mother implored her son to vote for women's suffrage, and he cast that winning ballot, and Tennessee cast that ballot for our country to have that. A place where a doctor and a wife advocated for child safety laws and worked so hard as citizens until Tennessee became the first state in the country in 1978 for child safety laws. When in 1960, 150 students got arrested to eat wherever they wanted to.
Yes.
And where in 1956, 12 kids in Clinton, Tennessee desegregated a school on court order. Because courage is the flip side of fear, Tennessee produces courage in spades, as we showed this year. Now, when we think about guns, there's a big gaping hole about how we talk about them, and I have to mention that. The hole is that racism is at the center of gun ownership.
Yes.
Historically and at present. Fear of armed black people was the basis of our Second Amendment, and for laws like the one in the Tennessee Constitution that in 1834 restricted gun rights to the free white men of the state. The scariest thing in the white South was the revenge of enslaved people that had been harmed and traumatized for generations. And the leaders of the South advocated very hard to ensure that their armed militias, comprised of citizens, would still be armed and be able to police these enslaved people. That gaping hole is also the racism was the big motivation for our biggest gun control measure ever. The Federal Gun Control Act was passed in fear of Black Panthers.
That's right.
Our reinvention and rebranding of our Second Amendment rights today are still attached to our racism, and this must be named. It is our Black and brown communities that are harmed most by the ubiquitous of guns. Interpersonal gun violence is responsible for the majority of deaths in Tennessee, not mass shootings. But the thing is, we all hurt when there are guns everywhere. Not only is the system failing our communities of color, it is also failing our rural communities, our veteran communities, and our white communities. White populations die twice as much by suicide than others. Instead of bolstering our healthcare system for mental health support, increasing our funding for our education, which we know is in danger, increasing affordable housing, we're just flooding our communities with guns instead. In 2003, I encountered my first gun in Afghanistan. It was the early days of that presence there, and I got to meet a lot of military people, and they became my friends. And we would sometimes be able to spend a very rare hour, a break together. And their only wish, my friends, was to be as far apart from their gun as possible. Their knowledge or their ability of freedom is to not have to use their gun or have a gun on them. It required vigilance and a need to be on call that was not fun. So here we are in Tennessee 2023, and guns have become an accessory item, a form of personal expression. We sling AR-15s on our back like a purse to say something about our philosophy or our values. And I think, what level of peace have we achieved that is what we believe? Because if you've been to war, if you've experienced war, and anywhere, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Ukraine, guns are not a symbol of freedom or values, but destruction. For the nation to allow the arming of its citizens against each other is astonishing. The logical conclusion of the notion that I need guns to protect me from you and you need them for me is that trust and connection have been eroded and that we are all in danger's way all the time because of the mutual suspicion we live by. So what do? First, we heal the fear of isolation and separation by coming together. We connect with each other so that the thread of love is what's pulling us. We counter the poison of lies coming through our screens by engaging with one another on the actual stories of our lives. Those are complicated and layered. They cannot be communicated in characters on a screen. We let the need for community drive us. And then we go to the advocacy gym and we work out. We get strong for years of advocacy, activism, and pressure to come. We recognize our democracy needs us, our civil rights needs us, our equity needs us. And we have to put more on the line than we ever have before. The Iran my parents left was not the Iran you know today. We can go back to the dark ages very quickly. If we do not sacrifice our convenience and comfort for our democracy, our equity, our anti-racism, and our safety, we will lose it. I welcome every single person that has heard and will hear the call to action from any background to join. There are many that believe, there are very well-funded movements that believe that citizens should not be advocating in our democracy, that a chosen elite should legislate and lead. We must show them that that is not true. And we change by participating in our elections. As you know, Tennessee is not scoring well on this. Some years we show up, so I know we can. But I know you'll say my vote doesn't count, we've been too gerrymandered, it doesn't matter anyways. Look, I've seen those maps, they are awful. It looks like a snake that's wrapping one random village to another one and missing a bunch of cities in between. I understand that. It's unfair and absurd. But way out, we must vote. It's urgent. Because there are those alive today that couldn't vote at some point in their lives because of discrimination. We vote for the folks that have been stripped of their right because of incarceration. We vote for the kids that are on the school-to-prison pipeline that will not ever be able to vote and will never be able to hear how that experience affected them. We vote because that is our right. And we vote not once every 2 years or once every 4 years, but twice a year, every year. We saw in the special session that our legislators do not legislate to their constituents, likely just to their small primary voters. So become a primary voter. It does not matter what anybody's identity is. No one wants to be shot.
True.
Not at the gas station, not in a school, not in a high school football game. It doesn't matter where you came from, 6th generation Tennessean, or you moved here because someone gave you a great job and wanted you to contribute. You are a Tennessean. It doesn't matter what new rules are put in place, our rights are our rights. It doesn't matter how much oxygen is taken from us, we have lungs full of air to breathe into it. And it doesn't matter how much corruption they bring into our government, we can read the receipts.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how much they want to deplete our communities of the resources that belong to them. We will continue to show up. We are living, breathing, creative, and powerful Tennesseans, and we will make change. Thank you.